We didn't recognize the moment by noise. It arrived quietly, the way some betrayals do, already finished by the time anyone thinks to speak. Emily Dawson's story matters because nothing was taken from her in a rush. It was taken cleanly, efficiently, and without permission. This is how she remembers it. My phone buzzed while I was rinsing a mug at the sink. Just one vibration. No missed calls stacked behind it. No warning. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and looked down. House is sold. It's done. That was it. No hello. No explanation. I stared at the screen long enough for the letters to blur, then sharpen again. Like they were checking whether I'd really read them. The house wasn't just property. It was my grandfather Frank's place. The one thing he was precise about, the thing he'd said out loud, was meant for me. I set the mug down. Too hard. It clinked against the counter and I felt my shoulders rise. Then, lock. I didn't call my parents. I didn't type back. I stood there, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, thinking about how final the word sold sounded when it wasn't followed by anything else. We noticed the pause there, the way people do when a decision has already been made for them. I picked up my phone again and scrolled to one name I trusted, Cole Turner. I hit call and waited for it to ring, telling myself to stay calm, because calm was the only thing I still had. If this story stays with you, sharing it helps it travel. The call connected on the third ring. Cole's voice came through steady, like he'd been in the middle of something and simply shifted his weight. "Slow down," he said after I read the text out loud. Not sharp, not dismissive. Just firm enough to catch me before my thoughts ran off. "Tell me exactly what you have." I sat on the edge of the chair and stared at the floor. The grain in the wood looked worn in the places people usually stand. "That's all I have. A message." He didn't ask. He didn't explain. Cole paused. Papers rustled. A pen tapped once, then stopped. "Has anything gone through probate yet?" I swallowed. "Not that I know of." Another pause. Longer this time. "Okay. Then something here is either rushed or wrong. Possibly both." My chest loosened a notch. Not relief, just structure. "He lives there. He handled the appointments. The bills. That gives access," Cole said. "Not authority." I closed my eyes and leaned my head back against the wall. "What do you need from me, time?" he said. "And every document you can find. We start there. By the next morning." Cole had a folder open on his desk with my name scribbled across the tab in his uneven handwriting. I could hear the clicking of his mouse through the phone, the soft exhale he made when something didn't line up. "There's an emergency power of attorney filed here," he said. "Dated a little over 6 weeks before your grandfather passed." I pressed my thumb into the edge of the table. He never mentioned signing anything like that. Cole didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice had shifted. Quieter. "There's also a supplemental will. Short. Convenient. Leaves the house to your brother." My stomach dipped. Not sharp pain. Something duller. Heavier. "That one was filed after the power of attorney," Cole continued. "During a hospital stay. I pictured my grandfather in that narrow bed, rails up, television on too loud because his hearing aids kept slipping. He was sedated. On and off. I know. A pause. That's in the records. Keys clicked. A page turned. There's one more thing. Visitor logs from the assisted living facility. I waited. A man named Miles Grant signed in twice. Listed himself as a financial consultant. The name didn't land right. Too smooth. Too neutral. I've never heard of him. No reason you would have. Cole hesitated. But your brother didn't sign these documents alone. Someone walked him through it. I stared at the wall where a small crack ran from the corner of the window frame down toward the baseboard. I'd lived with that crack for years without noticing it. So this wasn't just him deciding something, I said slowly. "No," Cole replied. "This looks like someone deciding it for him." I drove into Milwaukee late afternoon, the light already thinning. I didn't stop anywhere first. Didn't need to. My hands knew the turns. When I pulled up, the house looked the same from the outside. Porch rail still chipped. Front steps still slanted just a little to the left. The dumpster was new. It sat at the curb like it belonged there. Bright paint, clean edges. I parked and walked over before I let myself look inside. Old habit. Delay the hit. The first thing I saw was the blue cooler my grandfather used for fishing, lid cracked, one hinge missing. Then a box of papers, loose, spilling out, envelopes with his handwriting, the careful block letters he used when he wanted to be understood. I climbed up onto the curb and leaned in. Photo albums. The red one from when I was little. The one with the plastic sleeves that stuck to your fingers in summer. A pair of work gloves, fingers stiff with dried paint. His radio. The one that only picked up 2 stations if you turned the dial just right. Someone behind me cleared their throat. A man in a reflective vest stood a few steps back, clipboard tucked under his arm. "You family?" I nodded once. "They told us to clear it out," he said. "Not unkind. Interior only. No demo." "Did they say where it was going?" He shook his head. "Just off the property." I thanked him and he walked away. I stayed where I was. Didn't cry. Didn't move. I reached in and picked up the gloves. They still smelled like the garage. Oil and dust and something metallic. Inside the house, the rooms echoed. No furniture, no photos on the walls. Just nail holes and quiet. I stood in the doorway of the back room where his workbench used to be, the outline still darker on the floor. That was when the weight finally settled. Not that it was sold, that it had already been erased. Ryan was in the kitchen when I came back in, leaning against the counter, arms crossed, the way he did when he'd already decided how a conversation was going to end. He looked tired. Not guilty tired, defensive tired. "You didn't have to come all the way out here," he said. "We could have talked." I set the gloves down on the table. He glanced at them, then away. "You cleared the house fast. They were just things." His jaw tightened. "Someone had to deal with it. You dealt with it by throwing it away." He pushed off the counter and paced once, short and sharp. I paid the utilities. I drove him to appointments. I handled the late-night calls when he couldn't sleep. "You flew in for holidays." The words landed, one after another. "Practiced. I never said you didn't do those things. Then don't act surprised." He stopped in front of me. I was there. I earned the right to decide. I kept my voice even. It took effort. You earned access, not ownership. His laugh came out quick, brittle. "You think trust pays bills? Did he tell you to sell it?" Ryan hesitated. "Just a beat. Long enough. Miles helped with the paperwork," he said. He knew how to move things along. Linda notarized it. Everything was standard. Standard for who? He rubbed a hand over his face. "I signed what they put in front of me. That's all." The room felt smaller. Not because he was lying. Because he wasn't admitting the part where he stopped reading. I picked up the gloves again. "You didn't just sign papers," I said quietly. "You signed me out." Cole called the next morning while I was sitting on the back steps, staring at the spot where the workbench used to be. My coffee had gone cold without me noticing. "I filed for an emergency injunction," he said. Calm, measured. The title's frozen. I let that settle. Frozen sounded solid, like something that couldn't slip out of my hands while I wasn't looking. They can't sell, can't transfer, can't touch it until the court looks at everything. A truck passed out front, rattling the loose window pane. I watched the glass tremble. Then, still. Ryan knows I asked. By now, papers shifted on his end. So does the buyer. I pictured Miles Grant's name typed neatly on documents, the way Cole had described it. Clean margins, confident signatures. He asked for a meeting. Cole added, "Not hostile. Yet." I exhaled. Slow. "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing alone." Cole said, "If he wants to talk, we do it on our terms." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. My hand rested on the step beside me, palm flat, grounding myself in the grit of old paint and wood. "Okay," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." Miles chose a coffee shop near the courthouse. Neutral ground, high ceilings, too bright. He stood when we walked in, suit pressed, smile already in place like he'd practiced it on the way over. "Emily," he said, warm, as if we'd met before. "I'm glad you came." Cole took the chair across from him without ceremony. I sat beside Cole, hands folded, knuckles pale. Miles talked first. About timing, about misunderstandings, about how complicated families can get when paperwork moves faster than feelings. He spoke in smooth, careful lines, never raising his voice, never touching the cup in front of him. "I've already invested a lot here," he said, finally. "Permits, planning, labor deposits." Cole leaned back slightly. "The title is frozen." "Yes," Miles agreed. "Which is why I'd rather solve this without dragging it out." He slid a folded sheet of paper across the table. Not toward Cole. Toward me. 140,000, he said, like he was naming a reasonable distance between two cities. "Paid quietly. You walk away. Your brother keeps his life intact." My eyes stayed on the paper. I didn't open it. I thought about Ryan's face in the kitchen, the way he'd flinched when I set the gloves down. Miles lowered his voice. "Court records don't disappear. Careers don't recover easily. I'm offering you a clean exit." Cole's hand moved, slow and deliberate, stopping the paper halfway. "We're not here to bargain your way out of a mess you helped create." Miles's smile thinned. Just a touch. He looked back at me. "This doesn't have to get ugly." I met his gaze. It took more effort than I expected. "It already is," I said, quiet, steady. I stood, chair scraping lightly against the floor. The paper stayed on the table. Outside, the air felt sharper. I breathed in, then out, and kept walking. Cole arranged access that afternoon. A short window, supervised, enough to document what was still there. The house felt different with permission attached to it. Quieter, like it was holding its breath. I went straight to the hall closet, the one with the stiff door that always stuck unless you lifted it an inch before pulling. I hadn't thought about that trick in years. My hand remembered, behind folded tarps and a stack of flattened boxes. There it was, a small metal lockbox, dull gray, heavier than it looked. The latch resisted, then gave. The sound was soft, familiar. Inside, a folded letter with my name written carefully across the front. Beneath it, a flash drive taped to the bottom with old masking tape, and a set of papers clipped together, edges yellowed, dated years back. I sat on the floor. Didn't rush. The letter came first. His handwriting was steady, slower than it used to be, but sure. He wrote about pressure, about people mistaking proximity for permission, about why he trusted me with things that didn't move fast. I plugged the drive into my laptop. The screen blinked, then his face filled it. Frank at the kitchen table. Same chair, same window behind him, a calendar visible over his shoulder, the date circled in red. "If you're watching this," he said, voice even. Someone tried to make decisions for me. He talked about the power of attorney, about never signing it, about knowing someone would try. He looked straight into the camera when he said my name, like he expected me to be there. My throat tightened, not enough to cry, enough to feel it. I closed the laptop and pressed my palm flat to the floor. The house creaked once, settling. When I stood, I put everything back in the box, lined it up, took photos, careful, methodical, the way he taught me. Outside, the light was already fading. I locked the door behind me and held the key for a second longer than necessary. The ruling came on a Thursday morning. Short hearing, clear language. The power of attorney was invalid. The later paperwork didn't stand. The sale was voided by the time I stepped back outside. The air felt lighter, not because I'd won, but because the waiting was over. Ryan didn't look at me when it ended. He left early. No shouting, no apology, just distance settling into place. I let it. Weeks later, I unlocked the house again, this time without supervision. I walked room to room slowly. The workbench stayed. I had it cleaned, not restored. The scratches mattered. I left the chair by the window where Frank used to sit and listen to the radio hum between stations. I didn't turn the house into a memorial. I turned it into something useful. A small workshop, open hours. Neighbors stopped by. Kids learned how to fix loose hinges and sand rough edges. I kept my grandfather's gloves on a hook by the door. Some nights, after everyone left, I sat on the steps and held the key in my palm, not to remind myself of what I'd saved, but of what I'd learned. Emily Dawson doesn't confuse access with permission anymore. She doesn't mistake quiet for consent, and she knows now that protecting what matters doesn't always look loud. We noticed how the house didn't end the story. It gave it somewhere to keep going.